Okay, welcome back everyone. This is Mr. Cat-Eye. Now in my last video I covered CERN, the Baltimore, Maryland riots, those riots that spread to New York City, and showed how the Earth grid ley lines connected all of those locations to include Washington, D.C. Now, this video is probably going to be a little difficult for some of you who aren't as familiar with my work or my findings with regard to the Earth grid ley lines. And so the only thing I could tell you is to go back to MH370, because that's when I was aware of Earth grid lines, but I didn't know of their direct involvement with ritual code and or CERN and things of these nature, really until I started figuring things out with regard to Earth grid node 43, which is the location of where they claim MH370 crashed, which is west of Australia. Now, okay, that last video covering Baltimore identified within these ley lines, identified a very special area, marked out here in red and black. It clearly defined a 5-sided area, very special. And let me point out how special it is. There are no Earth grid ley lines except one, the one running down the middle, okay? Which means that this entire area has 5 sides and 2 halves. This special 5-sided pentagonal area I knew was very special, because not only is there a lack of Earth grid ley lines, there's only one. That one ley line splits the whole area in half and shows us the pattern of one large area, 2 halves, 1, 2, the 1-2 pattern. Now I mention this because while most of you I'm sure wouldn't agree, I'm getting ready to tell you something that I'm getting ready to prove. First of all, most of this video is going to be primarily with regard to Pope Francis and his visit to the USA and how it relates into this 924 prophesized DLE and this window of time that we've been shown over and over in Google Doodles, crop circles, etc., etc. Now, the Pope has always been a factor. Back when MH370 kicked off as a major time manipulation, there were many things that the Pope was involved in or that he was doing, things that they were hiding with regard to their Ninth Circle cult, if you recall, was key when MH370 was being discussed in the media. But many things went on with regard to the Pope during that time frame that I know were ritual efforts to protect him. Now, with that in mind, here's a statement that I'm getting ready to make, but of course I'm getting ready to prove it. But I want you to look at this image to your left here, and I want you to know first and foremost that this 6-sided Shield of David, Star of David, Seal of Solomon, whatever you want to call it, although if it were the Seal of Solomon, the lines would be continuous and you would see them overlapping, interlacing each other. But as a Star of David, Shield of David, 6-pointed star, a 6-pointed star. Now to get to the 6-pointed star, I had to pass through a 5-pointed star, and I mean that literally. But I'm going to show the code that's in this image, and this raw image of merely 5 lines, this area in red, this 5-sided area that I call a pentagonal area, 5 sides. When I placed this Star of David as opposed to the 5-pointed star into this special area, it revealed to me the following code that's right here in your face right now. You just can't see it because, well, it's here, and unless you're like me and you were to start looking at the numbers that come from the ley lines, the segments, the halves, the quarters, these ley lines, but this 5-sided area begins it all. And because it begins it all, once I applied the 6-sided star, it revealed in code that I'm getting ready to show you the dates of 915, which is the very first thing it identified. This wasn't second, third, or last. It was the first item identified, 9:15. Why is that important? Because it's associated with Jade Helm, and we've seen this. And so I know that whatever's going on with regard to Jade Helm, ISIS, all of the factors involved in Jade Helm, the Walmart closures, all of that, all of those things are all in some way linked to these Earth grid ley lines. I showed how all 5 Walmart stores were on ley lines. This is important, people. So if you lose it here a little bit, just I'm gonna try to slow down. But this is what's in this raw image right here: 5 sides and a six-sided star in this location, showing these Earth grid ley lines, produces 9:15. 9:21, which is supposedly the start date. We've been shown this over and over recently in a crop circle. 9:21 through 9:24. 9:23 and 9:24 have been shown to us over and over and over again. And it's right here in your face. We're also going to see 9:25 and 9:26. We're going to see a total of 7 dates identified just from the 5 sides and the 6-pointed star in the center. There are numbers associated with these angles, and so all I did was count them, reveal them, and when I saw what was there, I started jotting them down. And when I realized I could produce 9:15 first and foremost, and then proceed to 9:21, 9:22, 9:23, 9:24, 9:25, 9:26. And the reason it goes through 9:26 is because, you see, these dates are encompassing the Pope's visit to the United States. Now, he visits Philly specifically on the 26th and the 27th. Now, he leaves to arrive here. He's supposed to arrive late the 21st or the 22nd. He meets with Obama in Washington, D.C. Now, on the 24th is a big day because that's the day that the Pope addresses the United Nations General Assembly, where he has to say something important to the United States and to the world. Now, what could it be? And I've been giving myself all kinds of time to dwell on what it could be, because, you see, it's related to this 924 ELE. There's an object in space that, I don't know whether they're going to tell us it's an alien craft full of aliens or whether it's actually an asteroid. I don't know. But the whole point about this video report is that I want to show that this image, these Earth ley lines, and this special 5-sided area that encompasses Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, the Twin Towers, everything, irrespective of whether I put a 5-pointed star or a 6-pointed star, all of those locations I just mentioned would be inside the star within the 5-sided red that you see here. Now, when I realized I could produce 7 distinct numbers and realized what they related to, I had to include the Pope as a discussion piece because, well, the Pope is key to many things, and he's been left out of many discussions here of late. And so it's time for me to reintroduce the Pope because, well, I'm going to show in this video, based on this raw image that you see right here before you, everything shown here for the exception of 927. Now, I can infer 927 if I were to, do so, but since it clearly is going to show 915 all the way through 926 without a doubt, then I give this importance. I give it a lot of importance because it leads all back to this key date, 924. That's not only a key date for us, it's already been prophesied as a key date for the world with regard to a possible tsunami or asteroid, some type of impact in the Atlantic Ocean. But it's also the date that this isn't coincidence. To have the Pope addressing the United Nations General Assembly on this date has put a lot of thoughts in my head about why, but that's for future videos. Today, I want to show the code in this raw image that shows what I've just claimed is in that image. Because you could look at this image all day and probably say, well, I don't see it. I don't see those numbers. But since I built on a code methodology dealing with the first 5-pointed side, the first 5-sided star led to the 5-pointed star. The 5-pointed star led to the 6-pointed star, and the 6-pointed star leads to all of these results. And so that's what I'm going to do, is show you how I got to this six-pointed star within a five-sided pentagon to derive all of these dates for the exception of 927. But since it's about Pope Francis, I went ahead and included it because he is officially in Philly. And since 928 is supposedly a blood moon, well, these are things that, that are important in the key scheme of things, because the Pope is key in many ways to many things. So, I've said enough. I'm going to show you the code now and then come into the final chart. Okay, final chart. Goes like this. During the Coptic Christian observation, the Coptic Christians that were beheaded, the 21, and then there was another incident where well, anyway, it goes like this. A five-pointed star has 5 points. A six-pointed star has 6 points. A five-pointed star ritual, satanic, inverted pentagram, 5 points, within another satanic inverted pentagram, would be 5.5. 5 within a 5. Now, on the surface, 5 and 5 adds to 10. But I had learned, as a result of the code, that 5.5 was half of 11, which meant code-wise that normally the numbers that I found associated with the 5.5 had to be added to something else equal to it to show the complete code. It was like half of something, 50% of something. And so when you're dealing with two halves, two sides of a coin, you got to just keep your eye on which side of the coin you're dealing with. But it goes like this. 5.5 was half of 11. But yes, it totals to 10. These two things are facts that need to be just known on the surface. Putting a six-pointed star within a five-sided pentagon, would be 5.6. Now, on the surface, 5.6 adds to 11. Now, this is very key, okay, because you see, 5.5 is half of 11. And since 5.6 is 11, 11 is a key clue in relation back to that 5.5. Now, like I told you, I had to work my way through a 5 to get to the 6, and this is why I'm trying to explain this, hopefully so that it can make some sense, because it's ritual code that I've learned over time. I've shown all the videos to support what I'm basically discussing, but since I do things the way that I do, well, I ask for your patience in listening to the rest, but I think you're going to find it most intriguing. Now, finding a six-pointed star within a five-pointed star, of course, to me is 5.6 visually, which is an 11. But it also meant much more, because, see, when I originally found this very special area in red as part of this observation when I was observing the Baltimore riots and discovered that Baltimore is in line with this Earth grid ley line node, which is a major node that goes right through Baltimore and directly to Washington, D.C. And matter of fact, it's right there near the vicinity of the Pentagon. Now, Philadelphia is here, and this is important because ultimately this is where the Pope's going to be during his visit along with New York and in Washington. He's going to be in a number of spots. But okay. When I realized that this special red area within this mapping of the Earth grid ley lines, I knew this to be a very special area. So special that, of course, I first played with it with a 5-pointed star and realized that something was missing. It was only when I applied the 6-pointed star to the 5-pointed sides, that I was able to generate everything that you see here before you. And there's a lot. And so, because there's a lot here, even though the numbers may be in your face, you may not know the significance of what you're seeing. And it's a lot more significance than just numbers this time. Unlike any Google Doodle I've ever decoded, unlike any ritual false flag that I have observed and been able to discern the code in the event, this is totally different. This is so different that when I'm done, I think you're going to realize why this finding is much more important than anything I've stated in a long time. Showing the code, trying to anticipate what they're doing is, of course, to me, a noble feat. It's never ending. All I'm trying to do is stay ahead of the game, expose what I can expose when I can expose it. But what I'm showing you here has been exposed for so long. We're looking at ancient history. What you see here in these earth ley lines. Yet, first of all, think for a second. When the founding fathers, when people came to this nation, to found this nation, and they put certain places where they are by design, back then the only thing anybody would have probably understood would have been longitude and latitude. And while this longitude line is important to Washington, D.C., as is the special area that makes up the District of Columbia, all of it ultimately is within a very special 5-sided area. And so, first thing that, because I'm a thinker, I said, this means that the design of our nation and certain cities and locations were placed in an area that science had not yet defined or knew existed. Earth grid ley lines are separate from your longitude and latitude lines, okay? Now, so, to see this special red area in red, where this 6-sided star, which to me is as Zionist as it can get, okay, to be in such a way highlighting Washington, D.C. and all because this goes to the Twin Towers, New York City, Philadelphia. It covers everything important. But to understand that what's in red and beyond, which I'm getting ready to discuss, was all, you see, someone knew. Even if they didn't know what they were doing, they were being told by somewhere, instructing them and guiding them to do what they did for a reason. And the fraternal organizations was probably one of the best, because someone with knowledge of the future could very well influence those within the fraternal organizations, and could be describing what they're doing as something noble for the future, humanity, mankind, wisdom, enlightenment, all the great tools and words that kind of draw people in to the blind side of following a dogma. Okay? But anyway, okay, this special 5-sided area has been designed before these earth grid ley lines were known about. This is important. And because this design was laid out before these earth grid ley lines were known about, at least by the world at large, then all of this data that's in this design was incorporated into this design that was there before our nation was even begun. Because you see, somewhere along the line, all of the different people in key positions, making decisions that we're told Washington is here and all Philadelphia, the Twin Towers, all of those locations were decisions that, while they may have appeared arbitrary or very, very, selective, the rich and, based on property availabilities and prices and, all these things that factors into why a place ends up being bought or not bought or used or not used. That's what we would think. But it was much more all along, and this code proves it. Now, it proves it in such a way because it's getting ready to encompass the entire time frame visit that Pope Francis is going to be in the United States. He's going to, in effect, depart wherever he's coming from on the 21st. Supposedly arrives, he's supposed to, on the 22nd be in Washington, D.C., meets with Obama, who knows, any number of things. But key thing, to me, is 9/24. On 9/24, he's supposed to be in New York City to attend the United Nations General Assembly to give a speech to the General Assembly on something very important. And what it is just really got me going, because for all of this to be timed and to be shown in a ritual code that's shown in a layout of the Earth grid ley lines that encompasses what we know as our nation and key elements within our nation, to show all of these dates means that these dates were always known somewhere way back when. Because if you had known how to decode what was there, what's always been there, had you applied these numbers that I'm getting ready to explain, you could derive everything here and then some, but for a very specific reason. So let me get into this code. 5.5 was half of 11. 5.6 is 11. When I discovered that the six-sided star within the five-sided pentagram is 11, I said, well, by merely looking at the layout and the design of the Earth grid ley lines, allowed me to see, and I incorporated 4, and I did 4 because I've been dealing with 4 cardinal elements. The number 4 has been in play, so it was just a thought that quickly came to me, and by using a 4, I applied 2 to the left and 2 to the right. Now, I saw that in my mind, and I played with it, and it was important that I did it that way, because I never would have discovered later what I needed to discover had I not seen and understood what I was seeing in front of my face as I was seeing it. Now, when I added these 4 sections that the Earth grid ley lines support, because these lines and their connectivities of what I've shown you here is where the ley lines themselves are connected. So I'm really showing you what's in red was the initial finding. What's in yellow is the add-on that gives me 11 plus 4, which then turns this into a 15. And 15 is important. 15 has been in play. We had a crop circle here recently with 2 rings of 15 that adds to 30. 30 is another number, okay? But 15 has been in play. We've also seen 15 as it relates to 9/15, Jade Helm, okay? Because that's supposedly the ending date of Jade Helm. Although February 11th, 911 is scheduled for Florida, 9/15 is what we're told is the end date for the Jade Helm exercise. But if it's the end, yes, it's the end of only everything they needed to take care of up to that point, because beginning 9/21, the code that I've seen and shown now that leads a group of days, 4 days, 21 through the 24th. 22nd was always assumed because it was considered within a span of days, but we had been shown, and I had reported 9/15, 9/21, 9/23, 9/24, and 9/25. Now I would tell you, 9/24, along with being the prophesized date that an asteroid impacts into the Atlantic, I would tell you that 9/24 and 9/25 came into play with Jade Helm, because Jade was coded 911, Helm was coded with the obscured date of 9/24, the more hidden date, and the more open date of 9/25. Now, the fact that the Pope visits Philadelphia on the 26th through the 27th, he's got some activities late the 27th, but supposedly departs on a blood moon. Now, these are things that all need to be kept in consideration of each other. Jade Helm as a conspiracy is so vast and far-reaching. I only mention it here because it's the ending date of that exercise. So, everything in this window shows a window of time leading from 9/21 through 9/28. But I would tell you, it actually shows, because of the code, the entire time frame of 9/15 through 9/30. This is what this ancient design, that ancient knowledge, somebody had ancient knowledge, because when they elected to design it this way, they were coding it with this code. And since this code is ancient, it shows these dates, but it also shows 30. Because you see, once this becomes 9, and let me show you how we get to this. Having discovered the 15, 11 plus 4 is 15. I said, well, that matches Jade, Helm. I knew I was onto something. But when I finally added these 4 elements, I saw from left to right that 1 and 6 added to 7, 2 and 5 adds to 7, and 3 and 4 adds to 7. Now, I also would acknowledge 3-4 is the mind control code, and what better place for it to be than right here, bookcasing Washington, D.C. I mean, I could make this up if I tried. Okay, now, having discovered these 3 7s, which adds to 21, this is what I call the code within. The outside code is 15, the inside code is 21. Well, 21 is 2 plus 1, which is 3. 15 is 6. 6 and 3 adds to 9. And the moment it becomes 9, these numbers become 9, and just so that you know, because you see we're emphasized 21. 921, 922, 923, 924, 925, 926. Now that's as far as I thought it went. But I'll explain my rationale here. When I realized it went all the way around, I realized this only because you have to still consider CERN in play and these Earth grid ley lines. That when this grid becomes active, because of the way it's been designed around Washington and these areas, New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, etc., each is a half of 2. This special 5-sided area is very special, but it's surrounded by all of these smaller quadrants around it. And so when I realized in the count, when I got to 6, that I had to continue the count, I added 7 and 8, which of course adds to 15. Add 15 back to 15, and you get 30. Now, I added the 9, added the 0. Now, here's 9, top side. 9 next to 8 adds to 17. Okay? And because that was part of the Pope's code as well, this 8, 9, 17 factor. But okay, 9, and then, of course, 10 would be a 0. Now, 9 and 6 adds to 15. So if we already have a 9, this becomes 9, 15. Now, and this would become 930. So I went ahead and noted 915 and 930 because not only have they been in play in the ways that I've already described, 930 only makes sense because you see, based on the Pope's visit, that this whole design supports the Pope's visit. It's as if someone knew all of these things were going to take place during this time frame because it's been identified in this design, these dates. Now, obviously it doesn't say the Pope, okay? It doesn't say Obama, but it does put this window of days that just happens to be the Pope's visit. I mean, for crying out loud, that's the point I want to get. Okay, now, because it only goes through the 26th, and I expanded it through the 30th, I realized it made sense because, you see, on the 28th, which is the blood moon, supposedly he departs, and so I got to thinking, depending on what happens on the 23rd, the 24th, anywhere in this time frame, especially on the 24th, when the Pope addresses the United Nations General Assembly, on that date specifically, whether he is going to tell us that a disaster has been averted by the hand of God, or whether he's going to tell us aliens have made contact and that they exist, whatever the Pope is so in dire need to speak to the world about, and to the United States, is one thing. The fact that he placed himself here within a ritual pentagram designed for protection, obviously, a protection from the energy that's going to be infused into this spot when CERN does their thing. Now, if that energy is part of a time manipulation, all of them being here at this time and doing what they're doing, for the reasons they're doing it, makes sense from the manipulation time because, you see, I'm still thinking it can go any number of directions. It can go one way, it can go another way. We have a plethora of conspiracies to choose from. We got San Andreas. Hell, they got a movie coming out. San Andreas fault could go. Next big disaster. New Madrid fault could go. Earthquake activity, it's another disaster. Then you got Yellowstone. it could blow. It's another disaster. Then we got ISIS invasion. That's another disaster. Then we got nuclear false flags, maybe in combination with ISIS. That's another conspiracy disaster. Then we got a foreign invasion, perhaps blamed on ISIS, but combined or backed by Russia, Iran, Korea, Cuba, any number of players that could get involved. An outright invasion. That's another disaster. In all of this, we still have a 924 prophesized asteroid impact date. That could be more than just one impact date for all we know. Things could begin on the 921st. But 924 for the Pope to be addressing the United Nations General Assembly on that date, and for this code to be in this design of these Earth grid ley lines that showed the special area that Washington is contained within, made me think that the Pope is here in this specific location for protection, a form of energy protection. Now, I've tried to think from the conspiratorial side of me. If an asteroid does impact in the Atlantic, Puerto Rico, anywhere in that vicinity, that based on, it would ultimately this area of the United States would be ultimately impacted. Now, the reason I want to expand and include 930, the time frame from 915 through 930, is because roughly that's 15 days. 15 is in play in so many ways. Please, don't get me started. 15 is in play. So, to see that 915 through 930 is a window of time, that's important. Now, what you're seeing before you is important. It's as important as it can get, but from a number of different perspectives. And, well, if you don't want to look at it from the ancient side, that's one thing. If you want to look at it as current because I just observed it, well, take it from there. But as a current observation, it shows that these Earth grid ley lines show a special area that Washington's contained within, and by incorporating the other quadrants into the special layout of these Earth grid ley lines that I know are somehow influenced by what CERN is doing, either transferring, sending, or energizing these nodes in order to affect some form of temporal illusion or time anomalies, a form of time splicing, time manipulation. Now, it's super secret technology, but the mere fact that Albert Pike and other great leaders in these mystery schools have promoted something that leads to this future time frame, and to now discover that this future time frame involving this prophesized asteroid impact is the very day that the Pope and his window of arrival through his window of departure is incorporated into this design right here before you. Well, all I can do is show it to you. I see it, and I'm beginning to understand things in a whole different light. And I'm going to leave that for a future discussion. This is as much as I want to say. CERN is a key player. The Earth grid ley lines are a factor and part of the ritual play, the time manipulation, part of the grand conspiracy that's being conducted right before our eyes. The fact that Baltimore erupted into riots, which then spread to New York, once again, this would elude and more or less convince anyone who's logical that there's some form of mind control. But in the form of mind control, let me talk to you something just, what I call time splicing. Imagine that on a given day, within a area that is so affected by these Earth grid ley lines that can be energized to do what I'm getting ready to describe, that on a certain day, everyone wakes up in Baltimore of a certain people, only certain people wake up on that day and do everything different from that moment forth than they would have had they not woken up that day because of what is being done with it's like they're either mind controlling people to do things that they wouldn't have done otherwise, or they're bringing those same people from a timeline into ours time splicing them in to do exactly what they need to do, what they already know they've done, to the exact outcome. That's the point. Because they already know. You see, if you already know the outcome, and you're thinking, well, we're going to put Johnny at this corner, and he's going to do what we think he's going to do. Now, that's a little too iffy for me. I think they're taking the actual event in time, segmented out of that space and time, and planning it into our Baltimore so that certain people wake up and begin doing the things they're doing. This, of course, is more further proof of a ritual within a ritual, because I've already discussed long ago that the New World Order had, in essence, created a ritual for the blacks, a race war, where the more they participate in standing up for their supposed rights and justice in the manner that they do it, violently and haphazardly with no real direction or real true leadership, the more they are a liability to themselves. But for everyone that dies for getting involved in thinking they're doing the right thing, for every one of them that dies, it's a ritualized, sacrificed death that's already been, in other words, they created the ritual and the rules of the game that says that if you play and you die playing this game that we created, if you die in that game, your death is a sacrifice to them, the New World Order, the Lucy's, blood sacrifice. And so the black on black, the black violence, the black riots, anything that's racial is all about a ritual to me. And so the more blacks fall into it, the worse, because they're just going to be sacrificing themselves, and that's exactly what those evil minds created it. That's why they created it the way they did, because they know what it's going to ultimately lead to. But the fact that they've created their deaths, even though we don't know when their deaths are going to occur, whenever they occur, however they occur, if they're involved in racial violence at the time, it's black on white, them, looting, rioting, whatever the hell they're doing. If you get killed during that process, you just sacrificed yourself to the New World Order. And well, most of these people don't probably care, okay? Could care less, okay? But that's okay. It's a ritual within a ritual. And Baltimore, New York, wherever. And isn't it convenient that the riots stayed within an area convenient to these ley lines? So there's either mind control going on or time splicing and a form of mind control. Because like I said, the people influenced by the actual people involved in the timeline splicing would know that it'd be too late, because if they're going to die, well, they're not going to have anybody to tell. That was a little different from what I recall. I thought my uncle, had a gold tooth, instead of a silver tooth. These are little nuances that, if you're around long enough, you might catch it. But if you're only coming back so you can get killed or to die, well, then it don't matter. And so your death is a sacrifice, but it also could be very well a time splicing element, as well as a mind control element, because even within the time splicing, the event has to take place in accordance to a certain timing. And that's the part that I've always said, this is how got me going on the concept of time splicing. You wouldn't have to alter time for the whole world and the whole planet, everyone involved, billions and billions of people. No, you'd only want to influence the time manipulation for the people involved in the location necessary to affect the time manipulation. That's why those 5 Walmart stores in 4 states that I showed as part of a 3-pronged invasion attack into America are key, because they're all on ley lines, which means that if they go active, they're going to be energized into either creating that temporal illusion or influencing those people within those areas of those nodes or those particular locations that are going to come under the influence of this energy that once again leads back to CERN. Now, I realize this is a pretty deep and far-reaching conspiratorial discussion, but I've always said it's never been a real simplistic conspiracy. Anyone who thinks the conspiracy is just this or that and that alone, then you don't have a clue. The conspiracy is so grand and so vast that even everything I'm pointing out to you is just but a glimpse of all the crap that they're doing and trying to do, all at the same time, in different timelines. Which is why I've noticed that when something fails and they move on to something else, they literally keep that on the back burner and sometimes come back to it and pick up where they left off. And that's because, you see, they're learning what will work and what won't work. And the faster they get at that ability, the faster the supercomputer has the ability to learn what works and doesn't work. Well, the more and the faster it can begin to implement changes, real world, live time, our time, to affect those future outcomes. Okay, I've said enough. This CERN, Baltimore, New York City, Washington, D.C. Earth grid ley line observation expanded into this, and I'm glad it did, because this is, in many ways, very different from the existing ritual code that I've been following. The fact that it matches the existing ritual code that I've been following, that is very key. But please bear in mind that this whole code was derived through the design that was created by people long before the science even knew Earth grid ley lines existed. So to be within a certain area defined by these Earth grid ley lines means somebody knew something long before the public or common, even during think of it, when this nation was founded and these places were established, no one would have perhaps even fathomed that they would have fallen within or been placed within a special area. But the fact that they are, and that special area in terms of this code derives all of these dates, that just happens to coincide with the Pope's visit and an asteroid prophesized impact date of 9/24. Yeah, it's a big conspiracy, all right. And I just hope you give me the patience to hear me out, because sometimes it's getting hard these days to discuss it, to discuss the many elements within the many heads of this conspiracy, because I just don't know who can understand me anymore. And while I try to slow down and try to present what I present to you so that you can get it, I realize not a whole lot of you are really getting it. But for those of you that do see and do understand that we're dealing with something much more complex here than just a simple conspiracy of blowing things up, no, it's much more than that. And the fact that we've, once again, as a result of this graphic, been shown 9/21 through the 9/24 time frame, and keeping the Pope's visit in mind, what that means to these dates, and then the follow-on dates means that this whole construct was for the Pope's visit, for this time frame, dealing with these important dates that I believe begins on 9/21. Now 9/15, because it's Jade Helm, any number of things could begin on this day, but I believe, much like the crop circle showed, what begins on 9/21 and takes us through 9/24, and 9/24 being the key date for whatever this object is. And that's why whatever the Pope has to say, I believe it's going to be a big one. It's going to be important. It's going to change everything for all time. And people better get to hopping around and sniffing around, because something tells me it's going to be big. Whether we believe it or not is another thing. But if they can sell a big hoax, a coming asteroid, an impact, aliens going to save us, or watch, they're going to destroy this asteroid before it impacts Earth, maybe one of those scenarios, okay, to prove to us how benevolent they are. We don't know what they have in mind, because the conspiracy is so far-reaching in the time of in the area of the time travel technology that they're using, and the way they're using it to time splice, manipulate time, construct time. They know the future before we do, before we even commit to doing things that are going to be part of the future. And because this supercomputer knows this, it has an edge on us, obviously. But I'm going to try to keep up. And so with that in mind, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. But this has been the update to the CERN Earth Grid Ley Line observation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.